Gwen Adams. I have been teaching at the Augustine Institute since 2017, and I'm just going to begin teaching at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. So this is a kind of a different thing because most of the time I teach lay people. At the Augustine Institute, we have a master's in Catholic education. And before that, we had, and we still have, master's in theology and a master's in pastoral theology. So most of the students I've had are either working at a parish or they're working at a school, and they have no power. And some of them are very young, and they are asking, help me? What can I do if I don't have a supportive pastor, or I don't have a supportive principal, or I don't? So I'm going to be talking about what you can do when you have no help and you're all by yourself. And if you do have a supportive pastor or a principal, well, then it's all that much better. And I've been in that same position myself before I began teaching teachers. And at Benedictine College, we have a master's in classical education, so from a Catholic approach. So I'll still be doing master's in Catholic education, master's in classical Catholic education, kind of weaving it together. Before that, I taught in a school. I was a youth minister. I worked at a marriage tribunal for 4 years. I taught at a Catholic college. So I've kind of run the gamut of different kinds of lay experiences. And one of the things I'll be sharing is sort of the grassroots approach and what you can do to support the young or the old teachers and staff and parish staff that you have who want formation, want to do something good, and would love support and definitely some direction. One of the things I learned the first year of being a youth minister was how to do something when you don't know what you're doing, and also how to talk about it. That's why I was really interested in the Charlotte Catholic experience and the talking points you mentioned yesterday, because when you're young and enthusiastic, you can completely wreck a project by talking about it in the wrong way. And your pastor or your supervisor or whoever will say, whoa, we're not talking about it that way. We need to, oh God, you're just alienating people who don't need to be alienated. So let's talk about cultivating the soil of Catholic culture. I might use the phrase building Catholic culture. I like cultivating the soil more because the farming, gardening analogies is more what it's like. You try to cooperate with weather and with God and with the elements and all the pests that are out there. And hopefully something will grow, but it's really up to the creator of the universe that all that comes together. We don't grow the seed and we don't save souls. You know, it's the Lord who is the source of every good thing and of all love. And I like the farming analogy because a lot of the things that you do go on the compost pile. A lot of ministry and teaching is more like shoveling dung. And, you're just sort of like piling it, you're like, oh, this is going to be amazing. It's kind of died. All right, let's throw it on there. The great thing about compost is, as gross as it is, it turns into this beautiful stuff that you absolutely need to grow the next experiment and the next generation of living things. So building Catholic culture, we all use that phrase, I suppose, but it's kind of anesthetized and sanitary and clean and building a beautiful building. And the messiest thing is maybe concrete, where it's a lot messier than that. So cultivating Catholic culture, I don't need to convince you of the importance of doing that, except maybe just to reiterate that you cannot learn anything about God or about the faith unless it comes to you through your senses. So we absolutely need to have a physically incarnated experience of the faith, and we need that. Culture does that. It comes to us through touch and smell and sight and sound and taste, especially with kids, right? Eating things helps them take in all the truths of the faith and come to know God through our bodies. We're body, soul creatures. Christ became a man so that we could be saved by him and come to know him in a way that meets us in the way that he designed us. I'm going to focus during this talk specifically on my favorite thing to hate about our secularized culture, which is disintegration. I've got some books out on our merch table. So I wrote a practical companion to this lovely book, The Heart of Culture, which is out from the Catholic Studies Department at the University of St. Thomas. It is, I don't have that book, The Heart of Culture. I wrote the sequel companion to it. The Heart of Culture is a very thin, beautifully written, concise history of Western education, Catholic education. If you want something that's eminently readable, you want to give something to someone who needs a sort of a vision for education, and to know the story of how Greek education, Roman education, Jewish rabbinical schools, how that kind of came together, and how the Christians synthesized and baptized it, and then what happened all the way from then to Newman to America in the 20th century. That book is great. And one of the things it says in the chapter on the Enlightenment is that there's a lot to be said about the Enlightenment, but it has 4 hallmarks, and I want to focus on 2. One is they abandoned the Christian doctrine of the fall, and they desired to provide a secular foundation for human society. Very radical ideas, losing the idea of the fall, denying that we're fallen and in need of grace, and denying the need for faith to be part of the way society is structured. Gaudium et Spes talks about the divorce between faith and life being one of the most serious errors of our age. So without that integrating power of faith, lots of philosophical factions filtered their way into politics, economics, education. You get rationalist and romanticist and post-enlightenment and Marxist and all kinds of Marxists. And I just heard we're on the 6th wave of feminism. 6 waves? I didn't know there was 2. It's like when you stumble upon one of those movie franchises, you're like, what? There was a Pirates of the Caribbean 2? I'd be like, I completely missed this. So there's faction after faction, and that has plagued education and educational institutions. So the Enlightenment priorities altered what people studied and how they studied it. In the Christian synthesis, all the way from the fathers through the monastic, through medieval, through the Jesuits, all Francis de Sales, all the way up to the Enlightenment, mathematics and science was much more harmoniously integrated. And maybe you'll be talking a bit about faith and science in your talk, Dr. Graham. Math and science were related to and preparatory for theology and contemplation. They lost that theological aspect, and interest shifted away from mastering a stable tradition of reading and pedagogies towards making new discoveries, innovation. And you'll see that on every campus in America. Innovation. They're all innovating. Good. And disciplines proliferated as new fields for discovery, with an increasing emphasis on specialization and professionalization. So education became its own discipline. It's no longer the business of the whole culture, including non-academic structures from the family to the parish. It becomes something that's the purview of those who have formally studied within a school of education. That's my really fast history of how that happened. It's much more complex, but that is the trend of, that's the trend. And now educational trends alter so rapidly that each generation can have a completely different educational experience, which is really kind of, I mean, we joke about it. In my day, kids these days, but it's kind of shocking that you can have grandparents, parents, and kids, and they use language and lingo about their writing programs, which we've had since forever, thousands of years, and they'll use these terms and they cannot communicate. John Henry Newman writes so well and so often about the dangers of building a society without reference to God, of divorcing theology from the curriculum and faith from reason. And I love especially what he writes about discounting the transformative power of grace. We are not immune to this disintegrating influence. Every kid who grows up takes in a little bit more of somebody used the word Kool-Aid. who used the John Dewey Kool-Aid yesterday? I was like, yeah. So, and it's older than John Dewey. He's splitting off from an earlier tradition. And I've read recent things like John Dewey didn't go far enough. Okay. So yeah, you get a new permutation. So we're not immune to this. I mean, we just grow up in this culture, for good or for ill, whatever that culture is, it forms you, you take it in. And I'm losing my place. So here's some of examples of how I think, please argue with me, of how I think Catholic education has received some of this insidious influence. An integrated Catholic education should form your senses, your emotions, your intellect, and your will. You should develop a love of learning and a desire for God. That's the title of a wonderful book by Jean Leclerc about Benedictine education. That they work harmoniously together. You love learning and you desire God, and your studies inform your prayer, and your prayer informs your studies, and they go together. So when it's working, you delve deeply into texts and subjects in the natural world, and you exercise reason, and you cultivate faith. But if this disintegration creeps in, it will minimalize maybe the intellectual aspects of Catholic education. There are some strands of Enlightenment influences which shape a kind of progressive Christianity where Jesus is just a moral teacher. And he's so much more than a nice moral teacher. But you can sometimes see in Catholic circles a temptation to reduce the Catholic educational project to a purely spiritual one. And so you can be teaching a book in a Catholic school, and it seems like all you're doing is looking for a few moral takeaways. Like, what's the moral of the story? We're teaching virtue. And of course, virtue is important, but the catechism is not all virtue. Virtue must go with prayer and the sacraments and the creed, and all in a harmonious way. So that's one way. If you reduce the whole educational project to solely a moral emphasis, or you can officially value theology, but the school culture is being developed without reference to theology and the purpose of life. For example, so many schools require certification for their teachers' teaching credentials for every subject except theology. More training for everything than for teaching theology. And it can send a subtle message that theology is easy or not important. If a Catholic school offers religion, but its influence is cut off from other subjects, the outcome will be like schools which don't have any religion. And in that case, the school will struggle to preserve its mission. And so, although parents are the primary educators of their children, and although bishops have a charism to teach, we've all seen this. Sometimes they seem like they're supposed to stand on the periphery while the educational experts manage the business of education. And then we see schools divided from parishes and departments and other departments, and teachers siloed from one another. And you get a dizzying array of disciplines and courses and pedagogical methods. And one more influence of the Enlightenment is, now that there's no church and no faith in Christ, education sort of becomes the new church, and people start talking about it in really messianic ways. I don't know if you've read any secular book on education. You can get really good ideas. So I'll be reading this book on the importance of reading aloud. Well, I love reading aloud, and I think it is really good for kids. So you're reading this, but of course, all these books, they end with, "This will change everything." So that's a big promise. So they'll speak with this kind of messianic language, and you get people into they get into these massive wars about things which are just tools, just pedagogical methods, and they treat them like their religion. What used to be the business of sacramental grace is now kind of been transferred over into schools of education and educational schools of thought. Monica Helwig is a writer writing more about higher ed, but she says this. Schools no longer seek or achieve the merits of earlier educational models, such as the integration of learning, the realization of the community dimension, increasing experience of the continuity of faith and reason, deepening respect for and appreciation of the cumulative wisdom of the past, and increasing progressive transcending of facile and unexamined prejudices, maybe what we were talking about yesterday, critical thinking. Every kid has a very simplistic view of the world, and they have to gradually expand that to understand what is still true, but also what is nuanced. And finally, the integration of life and learning. When I'm trying to pitch this to people, who are looking to sort of renew their education, or it's good, but they want to take it even better. I use that phrase, the love of learning and the desire for God. Both those things have to be happening. So that's enough theory. Let me talk about how, because I'm much better at the how. Keeping my mouth shut and just giving you an experience first and let you see what it's like. So I am certainly not suggesting that you do any of this, because I think the first day was really good. The deacon used the phrase, I think, about getting out of your lane. What was the phrase? Where you're driving outside your lane, like you're just doing, there's a temptation to do too much, to micromanage, to check the school schedules and the meal plans and things. So I'm not suggesting that these are things you should do, but these are things that could happen, or they're things you could support other people in doing. They're ideas you can give the staff that you trust, or the people who say, I want to help, parents who want to help, volunteers, staff, teachers. You're looking for immersive sensory experiences which inspire the imagination, evangelize, and catechize without words. One of my favorite examples, if you just want to see this all packaged together, is Joseph Ratzinger's essay, meditation, What Corpus Christi Means to Me. It's in his book called Feast of Faith. And he's a beautiful writer, and he writes about every sensory aspect of that feast and what it taught him. So that's a good example. So I'm going to do a three-pronged approach, not because I think this is the order, but it's better if you're doing all of them at the same time, but sometimes you have to take it one step at a time. So I put them in the order, like if you have to do it one thing at a time, 1 year at a time, the first 5 years, do it this way. So the first thing is integrating with time. Yesterday, we talked about art in the school. I have a chapter or a section on integrating with the space. The way the school is laid out, the physical things you encounter in rooms and hallways. There's no crucifix in here. Thing to fix. And then, so that it's like, actually, that's really funny. Maybe we took it down so we could make a point. So that's hilarious. So there's lots of things you do with the space. And then, of course, there's also things you do with time. We're creatures of time and space. So you start with the liturgical calendar. The way the school calendar is laid out implies priorities. And you want a gradual transformation, or if you have power, forget the gradual, you go all the way. A transformation of the academic calendar to harmonize with the liturgical calendar. And the first thing is you start with the day, coordinating the day around prayer, certainly starting classes with prayer and including prayer maybe before lunch. But there's lots of small things that an individual teacher could do. For example, I had a teacher in college, and we had a class, it's college, so the class was 2:30 to 4, but that crosses the hour of mercy. And when we hit the hour of mercy, she didn't make us pray. She just stopped class for very briefly, and she said, if you want to say a mercy prayer, here's a moment. And she was just quiet for probably 10 seconds. And then she just went right on with her lecture. And I think one of the big things is to try to find a way for the religion class or somewhere in the day so that you can gradually teach the children to pray, interior prayer, preferably before the Eucharistic adoration. I think one of the big battles that the Enlightenment has done is more stuff in the day. The days are just packed. And there's a lot I want to think about. You're doing too much. Where's the room for silence? Where's the room for reflection? That's the day. Then there's the week. Coordinating the week around Sunday. Anything we can do to make it easier for parents, students, teachers, and staff to devote Sunday to worship, relationships, and leisure, let's do it. There's a school I really admire. They have embraced a 4-day week. And that is so people can celebrate Sunday. They do their instructional hours in a way so that the calendar really works, but they take Monday off. They do their teacher meetings and the teachers do their prep on Mondays. The students do their homework, not over the weekend. They do it on Mondays. And then they all meet on Tuesday. That is brilliant. And I know the Cristo Rey schools do a similar thing where they've got a 4-day week so that they have a day where the students can work and they count that work day as part of their instructional hours. So I think, there are ways to meet the state laws and yet do what we need to do in order to really teach them. If you can't do that, you've got to go to school on Monday. That's fine. What about a personal practice or a school-wide policy against weekend homework or Sunday extracurriculars? Okay, you can't do that. What about a policy, personal or school-wide, against Monday exams or deadlines? I do this if my students ask for an extension. I always grant that extension, whatever day they ask it. I grant it so that it ends on a Tuesday, not on a Monday, because I know that just increases the chances of them not working on Sunday and leaving it to work on Monday. There's lots of ways to do this, but I think anything you can do to make it so that Sunday really comes back to the feast that it's supposed to be and have the place it's supposed to. And then here's the year. So coordinate academic and work holidays with solemnities and other important feast days. Work for a schedule that matches the liturgical year. For example, spring break, which accommodates Holy Week and Easter week, or Christmas break, which accommodates Epiphany. So many times in my life and friends and colleagues where on the Feast of Epiphany, you're rushing around looking for shoes for the kids and packing lunches and doing lesson plans. And you think, gosh, we're still celebrating Christmas. What's one extra day? Why don't we start on Tuesday? Plan feasts and celebrations. I know a school that would give Monday off to the students who had made First Communion on the prior Sunday. That's really cool. Even if they make it at different parishes, you can still pick a day, like this is the Monday where we honor the fact that they made this most important sacrament. If a school can take a holiday on a liturgical feast, then you should commemorate the feast when school resumes. So I was at a school once where, yes, we took the Triduum off and we took Easter Monday off. But when we came back, we didn't act like Easter had never happened. We had a shortened class schedule so that we could accommodate morning prayer. And then we did surprise donuts for the whole school to celebrate Easter after we came back from the break. If you can't take a holiday on a liturgical feast, like you have to have school on the Feast of the Assumption or December 8th, the school day should be marked in a special way with mass or communal prayer and parties, celebration. I feel called to parties. So you could do Eucharistic procession or just donuts or treats or something like that. If you can have flowers and music and games or something, all the better. If you can't do any of that, an individual teacher can schedule something more leisurely. I used to get permission to do a free reading day on St. Joseph Day. We were not going to take off school and I could not convince the school to celebrate St. Joseph. But I got permission in my classes to bring brownies and fun library books and games. And we just had a fun class together. The students, it was good. Or if it wasn't St. Joseph, it was a different feast in clement weather, not inclement weather. I would have asked permission to hold class outside. Or if I couldn't do that, I would say the most interesting homework assignment of the week or the month for the vigil or the day of that feast day. Or I would give students a night off from homework. There's all sorts of small things you can do so that the day and the month and the week become infused with experiences of this is important. God matters, faith matters, Our Lady matters, the saints matter. And over in my experience of school, I keep getting these experiences which remind me of that. That's time. That's my first prong. Here's my second one: cultivating integration with groups and institutions. We've talked with parents and students, so I'm just going to talk about with building relationships with faculty very very quickly, sort of incarnating that phrase gospel spirit. The school must be infused with a gospel spirit. What does that mean? Well, I say any individual can begin with simple acts of charity, praise and encouragement to fellow teachers, writing kind notes, trying to adopt the body language that communicates that you're available and interested in listening. I have received and I've been a partaker in tasks like washing dishes in the break room, cleaning out the refrigerator, restocking the copier, emptying the document shredder. You're rushing around and you find someone has done this small thing for you. It is a beautiful way to build up charity within a faculty. And most important, make coffee. Take the last cup, make the coffee. I've also gone in and been like, oh, the coffee's out. No, it's not. There's a fresh pot. It's a beautiful way. Encourage and participate actively in meetings, prepare well, ask good questions, help the leader stay focused. And then a last way to do charity is there's a lot of really long meetings, whether you work for a diocese, a parish, or a school, parent-teacher conferences, school open houses, lots of lots of nights and things. And so I've noticed when faculty have taken initiative to bring in treats or games or one time somebody even brought in the materials so we could make our own sushi rolls, and she taught us how to make sushi on a break. It was just really kind. And I used to have a habit of keeping a cake and a bottle of champagne ready for unexpected celebrations. The champagne was not on the school; it was nearby, but within walking distance, or a very short drive. So it was all ready to go when a couple announced they were engaged. When another one got a phone call that she'd been accepted into the National Dominicans, and on the day Joseph Ratzinger became Pope, all this stuff was ready to go. And somebody can do that. You can encourage someone to be that person. You can give them permission. Yes, you can bring in, yes. Oh, wait till the kids go home. It's 3:30. All right, yes, we can celebrate. Or there's also been at many places I've worked, the person who is willing to host a party or a dinner for all the faculty and administration. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time to prep and to clean up afterwards. But if you can support someone in doing that, this is an amazing way to serve the faculty. One time I was talking with a priest and he said he wanted to run this party for everybody, but he just absolutely didn't have time. And I said, whoa, wait, is there a budget? He goes, yeah, there's money. I said, I'll go grocery shopping. I'll bring the food. It was awesome. We had a wonderful party at the place, and he had empowered me to do the work. So the last thing in building, in fostering integration within the community that I'll say is, if you can teach a class as a priest, that is one of the best ways to build bonds within the community. There's so many things that we've said the last 2 days about why that's good, but I'll just add one more thing that a priest told me. There is a sense among trained educators, if they've gone to their education school, and we've all been drinking the Kool-Aid, they have a sense that if you haven't been in the classroom, you don't get it. It's so if they see you trying to do classroom management with squirrely kids who are sneaking around, trying to do a correction, getting yelled at by a parent, slaving away over grading and formulating assessments and losing papers and trying to find them, if they see that, your street cred goes up so high that it's so worth it to build bonds with the faculty so they know that you have done the blood, sweat, and tears. And then the priest said, and then if you've done that gritty, dull, work, you'll have all the more gratitude and appreciation for your teachers when they do all that dull stuff that goes into teaching, those boring days when the students are just like, staring at them and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. So if you can teach a class just to know, to know what it's like from their point of view, or at least to convince the teachers that you know what they're going through, that's a great way.